The first time I met our next speaker was actually at the First Purpose Summit in 2019. And I was standing at a cocktail table during one of the breaks of our First Purpose Summit and talking to this gentleman in a suit who was really asking more questions of me than I was of him. But at one point I turned it back to him and said, well, tell me more about yourself. And this gentleman standing there in a suit said, well, my name is Doug Odie Slocum. And I said, okay, well, tell me more. He says, well, I'm a brigadier general. And my first thought was, I don't get a chance to meet too many of those. He says, you know, I've been commanding Selfridge Air Force Base, and I am ready for a transition in my life. And then, of course, sparked the conversation. That conversation led to a lunch and conversations and great conversations since. And of all the gentlemen that I've met, this gentleman is one that is not just somebody because of his accolades, being a brigadier general, retired at this point, but also because of what he brings to the table. And he's going to talk about that today in the sense of his positivity, but it's not just positivity that you can bring to your organization, it's violent positivity. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brigadier General, retired, Doug Odie Slocum.
How's everyone doing? Awesome, this is gonna be great. My deal with you as we get started is I am your after lunch caffeine today, all right? So we're gonna have a good time and we're gonna talk about a number of things, but once again, just thank you. I have control here. There we go. So Kurt in his introduction kind of touched on this just a little bit, but there's a number of things I wanna talk with you about today. But really, it's the top word right there that's going to be our buzzword. When we talk about purpose, I want to tie in the concept of positivity. Well, as a fighter pilot, we spend a lot of time, we talk about an 80% solution being applied immediately and violently, a lot of times is better than the perfect solution staffed over the course of months. So in other words, doing the right thing right away. But when I talk about my leadership style that I've developed through the years, it's where I throw this word right there that I added now to the top of that title, which is the word violence. One, it gets people's attention sometimes. But really, it's the idea of being fervent, to be excited, to get some energy to it. And that's what I want to spend some time talking about, is this leadership style and some concepts that you can apply. And first of all, I have to ask, who's a leader in an organization? And the answer is anybody. Some of the most effective leaders I've ever met were not in a position of leadership at all. But I want to dive into that just a little bit. But to do that, I need to explain a little bit about my background, where I'm coming from. One is I was absolutely blessed for 35 years to get to wear the uniform of this country. And what a wonderful experience that is to meet some, well, thank you. Sit down in front, sit down. But the absolutely wonderful men and women through the years. And there's some principles and all through this journey that I've learned that I want to share with you. And a lot of it's been some hard-learned lessons. To begin with, if you think about it, most of you can probably relate to this. My leadership style through the years has developed. It's changed. It's adapted. And really what it's adapted on is my experiences. When I see a good leader, I mimic the things they do. When I see the ones that aren't so good, I make sure I don't do those types of things. So as I learn, I observe, I like to watch people through the years, and it's changed my lifestyle, my leadership style. But once I said, I had this 35-year experience, a lot of it flying airplanes, a lot of it not flying airplanes. I got to fly the entire time, which was great. But I also had my time back in Washington, D.C. I've been involved with the safety community for a long time, was the Inspector General. The last assignment that I had, I was actually selected for and got to spend almost 5 years as the commander here at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. And if you haven't seen what a gym that installation is and the wonderful things that go on there, you're missing. There's a lot. There's some absolutely wonderful people out there. But also, as I'm guessing, as you're sitting here listening to me tell this story, is you're probably making a little stereotype. And we just had a talk about stereotypes and how those aren't always good. And you think about military, and when it comes to leadership, I want to share some what I think are going to be unique viewpoints when it comes to that. And I'll start off by saying, in my 4.5 years out at Selfridge with almost 5,000 employees, I don't think there's one person, one time in that entire time who would summarize a discussion with me as, he gave me an order. That simply doesn't work. It's not how you work with people anymore. There's way more to it than that when it comes to our leadership style. But the other is when you see people in uniform, and I'm going to start with my first story that I'm going to share with you today, which when I first came to Selfridge, I was from out of town. It was very unique. I came in, nobody knew me, and all of a sudden, I'm the commanding general of Selfridge Air National Guard Base. I started in November. The middle of that month, I was invited to an event in town by a company CEO of a nonprofit, and I show up there, and I walk in, and they go, well, first of all, I'm dressed about like I am now. And I show up in this evening event, they go, well, who are you? I said, well, I'm Doug Slocum. They look in their list, they go, well, we don't see Doug Slocum on the list. Well, they go, who invited you? I said, well, your CEO invited me. They said, well, okay. And I got the old penciled in thing. You are at table number 46. I said, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I wrote on my name tag, Doug Slocum, and I went to table number 46. And I was standing there, and the CEO sees me, and she comes up and she starts talking to me. She goes, after a little bit, she goes, well, what are you doing back here? So this is my table. Oh, no, you're at table number 1. Come up front here, we're gonna get you at table number 1. So they come up, they take a place, they put me at table number 1, and I start talking to some of the folks there. These are some elected officials, muckety-mucks, other CEOs. It's an interesting group. They say, who are you? Oh, I'm Doug Slocum. Pretty soon, I'm just sitting there, and everybody turns around, they're talking to everybody else. I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs. Nobody's talking to me. All of a sudden, the CEO gets up to start the program, and she gets up and she goes, ladies and gentlemen, we want to start, but before we do, we want to introduce the VIPs. Here at our first table right here, we have Brigadier General Doug Slocum. And just like that, I became interesting. All of a sudden, people cared about who I was and what I had to say. Not as Doug Slocum, but it was the uniform and the rank that all of a sudden impressed people. So what I'm telling you as I start off here is I have no grand visualizations about what I am, who I am, that people are people. And really how you interact, it's an interesting study in social, I want to say socialism, that's not the right word, but social studies. Yeah, stop. I know you do. I love you too. All right. But first of all, there's a couple premises I want to start with. One is from a leadership style, 2 things I want to understand to begin with. And Jenny, this last period, if you were in here, was just talking about this. And it's fundamental principle number 1, that it's always, always, always about people. I can talk about planes, I can talk about cool stuff and everything else, but success, leadership, all revolves around people. And we have to have a very people focus. When I think about all my experiences in life, it's always involving individuals, relationships. Think about it for a second. Those of you old enough to have photo albums, when you go back and look through a photo album, what pictures do you look at when you're reminiscing? It's probably not the picture of the building, the nice landscape, or anything else. It's always the picture of people. That's what leaves the imprint, and that's how we have the ability to leave imprint on others, through our relationships with people. So once again, I'm going to start off with a little bit of a story. A couple years ago, we had a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Selfridge Air National Guard Base. We had an air show that went on with more than 235,000 people who showed up at our base. We had all sorts of chalets and everything. Well, my job, of course, what do you do when you're the commander? You work the crowd, right? You're supposed to get around, meet, talk, and everything. So as I was doing that, one of the chalets was owned by our own Macomb County government, decided to get a group, and it was a lot of our wonderful Macomb folks that were there. And I walked into that chalet, and I met this young lady. You can see I'm doing the fighter pilot thing, right? Talk with your hands, shoot your wristwatch, that type of stuff. And I got talking with Quinn, cute little girl, right? So we're sitting there talking, and at one point I said, I need to go. I need to go to the other chalets. And she goes, please don't go. Yeah, aw. But after a little bit, I said, okay, make you a deal. Quinn, I will stay with you and watch the Thunderbirds if you hold my hand. She said, deal. By the way, she's standing on a chair right there. She's really not that tall, okay? But literally, that was taken by her dad, but that was the picture of us watching the Thunderbirds together. And when I talk about the Selfridge Air Show and the cool stuff that happened and the hundreds of thousands of people, the story I told you first is the imprint that left on me the most was about a person and that relationship and this little girl named Quinn. Because we have to make that connection. We have to make that connection with people as we go forward. So I'm going to go right to my secret sauce, if you will, which is not the normally way you give a presentation, but I'm going to give you how this all works to begin with, and then I'm going to operationalize it and talk about it. And it's simply known as the Pygmalion effect. The simple explanation is, if I tell you that you're good, you're going to eventually think that you're good, you're going to act like you're good, and eventually you're going to get better. The same thing is, the opposite of that is called the Gollum effect, where if you tell somebody that they're bad, they're going to eventually be bad, they're going to get demotivated, and they're not going to be as good as whatever it is. And I think we can all remember those hurtful things somebody said to us in the past. But I'm going to give you some very specific examples of how we can operationalize this Pygmalion effect, or otherwise known as the teacher expectancy effect, to a good purpose. That we can affect people and we can affect organizations simply by this positivity, or as I like to call it, the law of self-fulfilling prophecy. So we can go in, we can be positive, we can interact and make it about people, and it makes all the difference. So, what are the things we're going to talk about specifically today? And this is not all-inclusive, but here are 6 things that we're going to refer to as we talk today that you can do. Now, I told you I developed a lot of my leadership style. Well, I developed a speaking style by sitting where you are and watching people talk. So I've always developed what I do thinking of if I was sitting in the audience. And the charter I would normally make with folks is, if you're sitting out there and you walk out tomorrow and you do exactly the same as you did when you walked in here today, wouldn't we agree that this is all a grand waste of time? So my goal is to make a difference. And I want to give you some concrete things that you're going to walk away with when we get done here today. So this is the deal we're going to make as we walk through. But here are these action words, these action things I'm going to talk with you about as we go. To begin with, this is the first one, and it's very, very simple. The value of names. Learn names. Call people by names. You know, I can actually talk to somebody. Sir, what's your first name? Right there. Yeah. John. Yeah, have you all had a chance to meet John? You should meet John. But you know, by the fact that I'm sitting here and I'm talking to John and I'm saying John's name over and over again, I'm actually physiologically affecting him. Did you know that? If I could put biometric sensors on him right now, he's actually having an effect because I've called him by name and we're having this conversation. All right? But thank you, John. Now, when it's all done, everybody come up. I want you to meet John, okay? But by the way, John, Skittles or M&Ms? What do you like? M&Ms. Oop, not a very good throw. Get those to John for me. All right? Scooby Snacks. There you go, buddy. Thanks. But learn the value of names. Some people tell me, I'm sorry, I'm just not good with names. Here's my input. Suck it up, Buttercup. Learn them. It might be tough, but you got to do it. Because you can, no kidding, that's the first step in connecting with people. You know, I was involved with a Southern Baptist church for a long time, and it really was a pet peeve of mine when people would come up and call me brother. It simply was the fact that that was a platitude and they didn't want to take the time to learn my name. All right? It's like I have a name. I have multiple names. You can call me my nickname. I don't care, but all of them. But connect with names. Learn names. That's the important step number 1 as we're going through. Number 2, we're going to talk about teamwork, or as I like to call it, wingmanship. And the basis of this word is real simple. All right? So you've got a picture of an airplane up here. If I'm flying in my F-16, there are 2 places I can't see. I can't see directly below my airplane because there's metal there, and I can't see directly behind me because I can't twist around that far to see directly behind. Guess where the threats, if they're going to shoot me down, come from? Beneath me or behind me, normally. So when we go into a combat situation, we have our wingman. And a wingman flies 1 to 2 miles next to my airplane because you know my wingman, or as my daughter would make me call her, the wing girl, flies 1 to 2 miles because they can see underneath my airplane, they can see behind my airplane where I can't physically see. And my job is to look under their airplane and behind their airplane where they can't see. So it's simple defensiveness. It's how we survive together in a combat environment. It's wingmanship. And we can take this even a step farther. So if we work together as a team, so if I have a bad guy that's going to come in and try and shoot us down, and I do this, and when we get further apart, if I do it right, the bad guy has to make a choice. He can turn towards my wingman, and then he turns his tail to me and makes himself vulnerable, or towards me, and he has to do this lobster eye thing that doesn't work very well, right, to try and track us both. But simply by working together as a team, he can't fight us. It doesn't work that way. All right, so we make it what we would even call in our business a lethal choice by working together effectively as a team. So those of you who are having flashbacks to the movie Top Gun, where they say, stick with me, Maverick, we're going to stick right here, right? That wasn't real. I hate to burst your bubbles. That wasn't a documentary. That's not how it works. If I'm in a combat zone, I want my wingmen to see me, but get as far away as me as you can. All right? Because we want to be able to have that good mutual support together. It's the whole idea of teamwork. And oh, by the way, if you ever go Google wingman, it doesn't talk about fighter pilots at all. It all has to do with bars, and it's very disturbing. All right? But when it comes to being a wingman, here's the next concept. So, if I could take you, and the best I could do, Tony, I've worked on him for years, and the best I can make him is 90% good at what he does, all right? So he's 10% flawed at whatever he does. But if I take somebody else to work with Tony and they're 90% good and they can catch 90% of the 10% of the stuff that he messes up, now two people together working effectively as a team have an error rate of only 1%. Now let's introduce a supervisor who catches 90% of the 1%, and now two people working together as a team with effective supervision, and the error rate is 1 in 1,000. We've taken a team of imperfect human beings and almost made them perfect. That's teamwork. It's how we work together to be able to get things done. If you're doing work by yourself, it's a challenge. How to work with others, how to team with others, how to partner with others is part of violent positivity. So let's take a sports analogy for a second. Let's keep running with this whole idea of teamwork. If you have let's pick a sport, football, all right? So if I have a football team, they even have different physical attributes, right? Quarterbacks are normally tall, long, lanky, can throw the ball pretty good. You have running backs who are quick on their feet and they can shift their weight. You've got wide receivers, they can move pretty quick, they can catch the ball really well. And then you have linemen and they move things, all right? I don't think you would just go into any football team and say, pick a position and give it a shot. They practice, they do different things, they have different assignments. Everybody has a role on a team. And this is exactly what Jenny was just talking about a little bit when it comes to diversity, is it takes differing talents, different types of people on a team to make an effective team. So let's keep running with this analogy. So we're gonna run a play. We get the football team out there, Blue 42, it's in the playbook if you look it up. Blue 42, hut! Offense, everybody knows what they're supposed to do. They have assignments, they have blocking assignments, they have routes they're running. Quarterback has it perfectly timed. He backs up, he delivers this perfect spiral pass exactly where it's supposed to be. It's a work of art. But the wide receiver decides, I'm supposed to do a post route to the left, but I'm gonna do it to the right. What happens to that play? And the result is, it's either an incomplete pass or even worse, an interception. And if you do that enough, you lose the game, right? And I bring that up because how many people does it take on our team not syncing with the rest of the team to make us lose the game and affect the score? One person. So this one person on the team who then comes back to the huddle after that, we ask them what's wrong, right? They probably have bad feelings, they're hurt, they need a hug. I don't know what kind of football team you've ever been on, but not any of mine. They're gonna grab you via the face mask and it's gonna come right here and they go, why did you do what you did? And you can have one or two answers. One is, I screwed up, my bad, give me another shot, I'll never do it again. Okay, we might give you another shot. What if they come back in the circle and they say, you know what, I don't like that play. I think the coach has screwed up. It should be that I go to the right. You call that play again and I'm gonna do the same thing again. What are you gonna do in your organization? Get on the bench. We don't want you on the team. But what I'm saying when it comes to the performance of the team and how we perform together and our objectives, there's a time and a place that we have to be able to get people on board with the playbook of the organization. If they want to try again, we're going to give them that opportunity. Learn again, we'll give them that opportunity. Make the same mistake twice, you're out. And that's part of how we work together effectively as a team. So partnerships, let's go into the next segment here. I just love this because we're talking a little bit about diversity, right? It takes different kinds of people to make a team get together well. You know, we were talking quarterbacks, whatever, you can name it, because on the team, whether it's in the organization, we have different backgrounds, we have different perspectives, we have differences in people, all sorts of differences, and we can name those differences in so many different ways, all right? So who makes up our team? Now, I know I just switched analogies on you, and you have to pop your clutch, because now I got a baseball picture up there. But who makes up our team? What is the diversity? We could name differences in people in so many ways, but let's go with a non-controversial one for a minute, and one of my favorite, which is age groups. I used to run conferences, and I would have 1,200 people in a conference For one of them, I decided, you know what? These are all senior leaders of the military. I don't think there was a person in that room under the age of 45. So I said, you know what I want you to do is get the newest, youngest person of every organization. We had 90 of them around the country. Bring them, put them in the front row, and I want to hear their perspective on all the stuff that we're talking about. So we set all these young folks in the front. We got done with our conference, and I put them into a little focus group, and we got talking. I said, what do you think? And they talked about social media and communication. I said, well, okay, well, we'll do more on Facebook. And just like my daughter, I got the pfft. I said, what? They said, Facebook is for grandparents. Okay, what do you want? I said, well, asking them, said, what is it you want then? And they held up the little smartphone at the time and said, give me an app. I said, okay, well, what do you want the app to do? And they explained it to me. I said, you know what? I don't know squat about an app, but I know how to get the right people together on my team to make that happen. And we designed an app that included one of the coolest things I'd ever seen, which was for suicide prevention. It geolocated where you are, and if you hit the Help Me Now button, it gave you the nearest person to you, director of psychological health or care provider, that could help you out in the Ask Care Escort suicide prevention model. One press, you were in contact with them. Cool. Yeah. But I didn't come up with the idea. People a lot smarter than me came up with that idea. You know, when I drive in my car, I've got XM radio, I love it. I hit the 70s music station button when I'm driving by myself. My wife and daughter get in the car, my wife hits either the 80s or the 90s, okay? She's a little younger than me. My daughter gets in the car, she puts on her earbuds and ignores us both, but that's another story. So let's go back to this age thing, and if you don't know what group you're in, I'm gonna give you a quiz and we're gonna find out, all right? So, without any hand, right now, just show of hands, don't yell it out. How many know what that is? How many played it? Good, all right. Quiz number 2, who is this? Once again, don't yell it out, just your hands up if you know who this is. Quite a few hands, that's pretty cool. All right, now here's a tough one. This is verbal and participation this time. I'm gonna put up a picture of, let's call him a person. Tell me what this person always says. Oh no, Mr. Bill! Right? This is before, Who Killed a Kenny and all that type of stuff. This is back to the old Saturday Night Live. This guy's made of clay, and they did terrible things to him on every episode, which always ended with, oh no, Mr. Bill! Now, anybody not laughing, talk to the old person next to you, all right? Because they will tell you what generation you're in. But it's cool to have the different perspectives, to be able to understand our differences. And we can take that to any way you want to separate people here, to understand diversity helps an organization be stronger. All right, sometimes it's simply about perspective. I'll show this picture up here right now, and I'd ask you what that is, and some of you probably never had the opportunity to see things like that. That's a satellite view of Michigan. Now, as a pilot, this drives me nuts because we're used to having things north up. Anybody ever draws a map that's not north up, I just tilt. Okay, so that looks a little bit more like Michigan, but once again, it's all about perspective. So what is the perspective here for most people in Michigan? Looks about like this, right? A little more on the practical level, all right? So, next thing we're moving on to when it comes to operationalizing violent positivity is integrity. Somebody earlier made the comment about everybody in the room has integrity, right? And I thought to myself, oh, they're not gonna like my presentation. Okay, so here's it is. In your brain, you have this idea of what you know to be right or wrong. It's your character. It's what you've studied to know the laws, the things you know are right or wrong. This is your character in your brain. Then you have the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. The integrity is the cable that connects your character to your conduct. Everybody follow that? So what you know, right or wrong, do you do what your brain knows to be right or wrong? So I'd ask you, are you a person of character? Let's take this a step further now. Are you? How many of you drive greater than 55 in a 55 zone? Let's put our hands up. We clearly have an integrity problem, right? Because you know in your brain that's the right thing to do. As a matter of fact, if you drive down the road and you see a cop, what's your right foot do most of the time? Comes off the gas, then you look down to see if you were still speeding or not. You don't even know, okay? But I actually am trying to bring up an important point, because all of you think you're people of integrity, but people act a certain way based on the accepted behaviors of those around them. Why do you drive greater than 55 in a 55 zone? Come up with whatever reason you want to. Everybody else is doing it. If you're on 696, it's because you'll get rear-ended at 100 or something like that. Okay? But why do you drive 55 in a 55 zone? So there's three things I'm looking for. Why would you drive 55 in a 55 zone? There are rewards. It's the law, but you knew it was the law when you were speeding. What's going to drive you down to 55? Police officer. Very well done, sir. Experience. I am not good at throwing in the dark. What's the other? An accident. So that's sort of your experience. You've had an accident before, okay? Traffic doesn't count. That makes you physically slow down, not mentally doing it on your own. Okay? There's one other. It's a little bit tougher. Well, it could be another. I'll give you Skittles. Why not? But really, it's one of three things that change your behavior when it comes to integrity. Observation, the cop's watching you, or whoever is watching you do something. Carrots and sticks. Rewards and punishment. All right? If you get a ticket, or you just got a ticket, you're probably not going to drive greater than 55. What if I could put a GPS tracker on your car, and if you never went over 55 for a week, I'm going to give you an extra $100 in your paycheck? Carrot. Okay, you might do it. But it's important to understand what drives human behaviors, okay? Observation, carrots, and sticks. We have to know that as part of what drives what we do when it comes to integrity. This is the wordiest slide I put up there, and I promise I'm not going to read it all to you, other than to foot stomp the bottom line. When it comes to integrity, it's who you are when nobody's watching you. Nobody's there to observe. Your kids aren't in the back telling you you're speeding, whatever it happens to be. You're on your own. How do you act? Which drives really great into my next point. We're going to talk a little bit about traffic and driving, okay? I'll come back to that. Let's jump to our words have amazing power, and I've got some great stories. So this is going to relate back to what we began with, all right? That what comes out of our mouths matter. Remember I said back to the Pygmalion effect, that what we say is going to change your behavior, it's going to change your attitude, and eventually it's going to make you better if you use the words properly. So let me give you a story. Story number one. Do you remember when Facebook first came out? You know, they were talking about being on leading edge of IT. Kim, I think you were talking about that. That has never been me, okay? I'm on the lagging edge of technology. So when this first came out, I was one of the last people, I think, to ever get a Facebook account. But when I did, I was kind of hesitant. I signed up for a Facebook account. Here it is. The first message I ever got on Facebook said, "Hello, my name is Tyler. You dated my mother when I was 4 years old." That's it. Ah! Oh my gosh. Wait, he was already 4. Think about that, you'll laugh later. But the whole idea was he had contacted me on Facebook, and eventually we ended up talking, and I remembered Tyler. Tyler was a 4-year-old kid, a girl that went to church with. We really didn't date, but we hung out. But Tyler was such a cool kid. He had a gruff little voice and a bald head. I used to rub him on the head. He always talked like this. But I would talk with him and developed a relationship. He was talking to me 14 years later. He had just turned 18 years old, and he had just joined the Air Force. I said, "Why are you calling me to tell me that?" He said, "Because I'm joining it because of you." So what are you talking? He goes, "When I was 4 years old, you would come into my house wearing a flight suit, and you had books about airplanes, and you talked to me about airplanes, and that was so cool. As a matter of fact, you gave me a book called The World Encyclopedia of Military Aircraft." Boring book, right? He goes, "It's on my desk in front of me right now." He goes, "But I'm joining the Air Force because of you." Who would think that what you say to a 4-year-old is going to have those kind of impactful words that are going to change life decisions later on? Words matter. They are so powerful, all right? And of course, there's a picture of Tyler, and that's his wife, Caitlin. If you ever watch Big Bang Theory, yeah, they're kind of like that couple, you know. How'd that nerd get her? I don't know. It's wonderful. He married up. He did great. But Tyler went on to have a wonderful career and has moved on. But words matter. Second story. Sorry for a chart, but I just want to show this. Is one of the jobs I had for a while in the Air National Guard was I was the director of safety. So this is safety. My organization in the red, the whole United States Air Force on the other line. Back in the 1970s, we were twice as unsafe. All right? We crashed twice as many airplanes and arguably killed twice as many people. As you see through time, we eventually got to parity in the early 1990s, but since that time, and these are trend lines, by the way, but since then, we're now about twice as good as the active duty Air Force. Something happened. What changed in our organization? What culturally happened to make these lines go this way? So I decided to dig into that. I'm always curious, my intellectual curiosity. And I found out there was an individual who had started doing a lot of what I was doing at the time, which was teaching organizational culture, behavior, leadership, accountability, all these types of things in the organization. But it made a huge impact. In fact, the United States Marine Corps was using it still to that day, which is about 30 years from the time that he started doing all this. It's amazing. It had a huge impact. So I decided I want to get in touch with this guy, and I had a hard time finding him. In today's day and age, you can Google most people and find them like that. Not so with Richard. I had to go out, find him, and everything else, but I eventually found Dickie Groban, now retired, and by the time I figured out his phone number, talked to him on the phone, when I talked to him, it was pretty clear why he wasn't speaking anymore. He didn't sound good. But I took some time and explained to him what I was looking at, why I was looking at it, and I said, do you understand that what you did made a huge impact in this organization that has lasted and has permeated and made us better, more efficient, more combat capable, and you've saved lives? He'd never gotten that feedback before. And at one point I said, you know, next time I'm down in Tucson, Arizona, I want to go out to a cup of coffee and let's talk. And he goes, well, you better hurry. I said, why is that? He goes, I'm dying. He had a disease and he was passing away. At the time, I wasn't allowed to travel and everything else. So I decided to be benevolent at that point and tell him, thank you so much for the impact you've had on our organization. We ended that conversation, and it was about 2 months later that I got a phone call, and the phone call was from his son. He said, my dad passed away. I said, I'm sorry to hear that. My condolences. But I want you to know that all he could talk about from the time you talked to him on the phone until the time he passed away was your feedback. He had no idea that his life had made a difference. Nobody had ever told him. He didn't have a clue. But then it was the coolest thing in the world because over the phone, they said, would you do me a favor? So what's that? Would you please come to Tucson, Arizona and deliver his eulogy? So I delivered a eulogy for a man who I had never even met, that I talked to on the phone once. Words are powerful. What words come out of your mouth? What things do you say? Do they build people up? Do they tear people down? You have amazing power as a human being. I'm sorry, there's a picture of the funeral. So back to words, all right? It's got a little heavy duty. Let's lighten it back up. Swimming. I love to swim. You would never know that by this pear-shaped body that I've developed over the years, okay? But I like to swim, and this is in Prince Frederick, Maryland, the Aquatic Center. And I used to go there and like to swim my laps, do the thing, listen to the underwater MP3 player. That is so cool, by the way. Listen to music while you swim. I got done with my workout. I went into the locker room to change. Something happened in the locker room. As I'm changing, a man I didn't know walked up to me and talked to me. Now, and I don't know if you know this, but that is against the code. All right? One dude who doesn't know another dude is not allowed to come up in a locker room while you're changing clothes. That's just weird, all right? But once I got over that, he actually walked up to me and said, you know, dude, you're a heck of a swimmer. And I thought again, that's a weird thing to say to another guy. That's like talking about their shoes. Who does that? All right? So I quickly got dressed and got out of there because I just felt uncomfortable. All right? So I ran out at that point. But you know, it was about a month later when I was looking at my schedule and I realized that I had been going swimming about twice as often as I normally do. Why? Because somebody gave me positive feedback. I thought I was a fat whale. He thought I was a decent swimmer. We met in the mid-ground, and somewhere I thought I could actually get better at swimming. So I did it more. Somebody gave me an input that affected my behavior that I wouldn't have thought in a million years actually changed me. And it was a stranger. Giving somebody feedback can have an amazing power as an individual. All right, so the other is when we talk about words that we use. We're still talking about the power of words out of our mouth. Most of you probably know this, but have never heard the name of it. Morabian's ratio tells us this, that very little of our communication is actually the word that come out of our mouth. The rest of it is our tone of voice and our body language, all right? Real simple. Anybody in a relationship in the room, you walk into your house and you say to your significant other, how was your day? Fine. Does anybody think that means it's good? The word says fine, but the other doesn't. And if you're only listening to the words, I'd ask you how your divorce went, all right? Because we have to understand there's so much more to communication than the words that come out of our mouth. We have other ways that we communicate, the tone of voice. Think about when you talk to your pets. You can tell them anything. If you tell them in the right tone of voice while you're rubbing their tummy, you're probably going to be a hero. The same thing's true for us as human beings. How do we talk? The entire time that I was at Selfridge, once again, I would tell you, I don't think there's anybody there who would ever tell them, I raised my voice. Commander, you just don't do that. In fact, if I wanted to be more impactful, I lowered my voice. I made people pay attention a little bit more. Okay? How we talk, how we have our body language, the things that we do when we're talking to people matter. So when we're communicating, words, tone of voice, body language, how do we do most of our communication nowadays? Somebody was saying text messaging, that type of stuff, or social media, right? Oh, we've got a problem. How do we communicate now? Well, we don't communicate very well. Anybody ever send an email and somebody misunderstood what you were saying? And then somebody got mad and hit the reply to all button, and next thing you know, everybody's being called into HR, right? Because we got a problem in the organization. But how we talk today has really devolved our ability to violently positive and encourage one another. What keyboard courage we have, right? Everybody's a bully online. Somebody bad-mouthing you on Facebook and you find out they're an 89-year-old grandmother or something like that because they have all this amazing muscle when they're hiding behind that keyboard. The same thing's true with us in our cars, right? You can flip somebody off or whatever, yell at them, cut them off, whatever, get out of your car, and then shake hands like you're their brother at church. Because now you have to deal with them face to face. We deal with each other differently. So the more we deal with social media, the more that it takes away our ability to communicate and relate to one another, which is going to decrease our ability to be positive and to get that message across. So when we look at that interpersonal communication, there's a lot of things that we can do, ways that we can communicate that are going to improve things for us. Okay? So I'm going to give you some very concrete things you can do when you're communicating. Before I do that, my thought I wanted to share with you is, back to the military side of things. If you ever study history, from World War I, World War II, all the way up through every conflict we've ever had, when we're fighting an enemy, we're going to war with somebody, what do we do with the other side? Have you ever thought about that? We give them names, right? We start calling them some bad, derogatory name collectively as a group of people, and the reason we do that is so that we don't feel connected to them. We do that on purpose so that we can do bad things and we can shoot them and not feel bad about doing that. So we have this ability to dehumanize others. So here's my challenge. Let's rehumanize. Let's get back to connecting to one another through some of these tools that I'm sharing and some other things that we can do as we go forward. So when you're talking to somebody, there's great ways to connect with them right off the bat, okay? Completely non-controversial ways. Now, the first one, if you all have not had a chance to meet our local Congresswoman, Lisa McClain. Now, if you ever tell her that I took a screen capture of a video, because they never turn out great, right? She was walking down the halls of Congress. I literally took a screen capture and put this up here for you to see. But it wasn't to see the picture of Lisa. What's off to Lisa's right? I would like to introduce you to Peanut. That's her dog. Her dog travels with her to Washington and D.C. and back, and her dog stays in her office, and her dog goes with her to vote. So if you had an issue with Lisa and you wanted to pick it up, and you walk up to her in the hall, are you going to yell at her? No, you're probably going to go, yep, oh, you did it, boy. Pets are completely non-controversial. What a great way to break into a conversation. Very few people get upset about a pet. I'm going to say that, and you're going to ask somebody about their pet, and they're going to tell you how it died and start crying. That's your problem, all right? But pets are usually a great way to break the ice. Another one is children, okay? That's my daughter, not my granddaughter, my daughter. But it's the same thing. I used to carry pictures around simply to relate to people. Because if you could make that connection, I'm no longer Doug Sloak. I'm no longer that big guy in a flight suit or anything else. I'm Kira's daddy, or I'm Boo Boo's daddy, whatever you talk about my cat. But there's ways to relate to people. These are just tools to use. Be ready to talk about pets or animals. What a great way to start a conversation with somebody. I used to carry this picture around with me all the time. And the reason I did is if I ever met children, as a part of my duty, which I did a lot, I would bring this picture out, because sometimes they don't know who I am, and I'd go down and go, look at this. Yeah. What do you see in this picture? It's our Christmas tree, and we haven't put any ornaments on it yet. Do you see anything in that? Do you see anything in that? And then I could actually, if the picture's good enough, put it right there. I don't know if you can see that. That's my cat, okay? He's my Christmas ornament. He's just hanging out in the top of the tree. But I love to show that picture because they go, oh, kitty, and they start talking, and suddenly I'm no longer General Slocum, I'm Boo Boo's daddy. And they can relate to me a whole lot better, and all of a sudden we've made a connection. So there's ways to do that with people that really make a whole lot of sense, okay? So, moving on, the value of failure. I know this is going to be a weird thing, but if you want to be successful in an organization, you want to be violently positive, you need to recognize, celebrate, revel in, and understand that failure is absolutely awesome. Examples. Most of you probably have heard these before, right? Whether it's inventing the light bulb, whether it's getting kicked out of acting school, whether it's 9,000 shots you've missed, what's the number there? 300 lost games, and 26 times he was tossed the basketball with seconds left to go to take the winning shot, and he missed. And yet, arguably, we call him the greatest basketball player in history. But clearly, he's a failure, right? Or the number of times you submitted your manuscript with it getting turned down, but persistently kept doing it to be one of the most successful authors in history. All of these are tales of failure that ultimately lead to success. So, back to a personal story. Like I said, I was blessed to be able to fly for all my years that I was in the Air Force. When I came to Selfridge, I'm the commanding general. First time I've ever flown A-10s. I've always been F-4s, F-16s, never looked at an A-10, flown it. They sent me to a school that was 2 weeks long to include 5 flights. So literally they were giving me kind of, here's some information for you, just enough to be safe. Look, you can take off and land, now get the heck out the door and go home. So as I'm back at Selfridge, just struggling, learning to fly this airplane at all, one of the first times I came back to land, we normally land north to south, but this time we were landing south to north. Well, to do that means you fly over Lake St. Clair. It means you fly over the Clinton River. It means you fly over Macrae Harbor. And you know what they have there? Cool boats, lots of stuff going on, and there's so much to look at. My little head was on a swivel, and I'm looking around at all this cool stuff and everything else. I overspeed the gear, finally get the flaps down, fly a crappy pattern, and I come into land, and right about the time I'm going to touch down, all of a sudden I have a thought of something absolutely horrific that hits me. And then my plane touches down, and I go, oh. I key the microphone on the tower frequency, and I say, I know. After this happened, what happened? I was coming into land. Now, I sent the Coast Guard up to take a picture of this. So all that gibberish in there is their infrared system where their camera is and all. But if you know runway markings, the little white stripes about 2/3 of the way up that picture there is the end of the runway, and the rest of that is the overrun. So if I was to put this little circle up there, you see all the rubber up there? That's where everybody touches down. That's where I touch down. Right smack dab in the middle of the overrun, which is not part of the runway, are my rubber tire marks where I landed short of the runway. I'm the commander of the base. So I had them go up and take this picture because I showed this to my organization to go, people make mistakes. I make mistakes. Look how bad I screwed up. I'm not going to get you in trouble for doing the same thing. Now, if I ever go out there and there's a second set of rubber tire prints right there and I did the same thing again, would have a whole other conversation. The failure's okay. Letting people know that you're fallible is okay. You have to be human. You have to be somebody that's real to them. Part of violent positivity. So part of these big conferences I used to host, Air National Guard, we had up to 1,200 people in the room at one time. This one we had about 500 people there, and I hired a professional juggler to come into the room. And the whole idea was, if you want to learn to juggle, and the guy got up and said, first time you want to, do this. And he goes, blah, 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 here, tossed him, and the guy tried it, and they fell on the ground. And the guy goes, that's awesome, wonderful. Everybody's going, what is he getting so excited about? He was willing to try. He goes, but now, come over. And he slowly said, now, let me take it step by step. And he walked him through it, talked him through, mentored through, and within about 3 minutes, he taught somebody to juggle. And then we took the entire room of people and had them juggle. You should have seen all the little sandbag balls flying over that room. It was absolutely hilarious. But the point is that to learn to do something, you have to start. You have to be willing to learn. You have to innovate. You have to be willing to fail. So if you're a part of an organization that's going to be successful in the future, the only way you're going to get there is by following a path of failure to get there. Okay? Failure is the key to success. If they're not failing, they're not trying, means you're not innovating, you're not incentivizing. You want to make sure that you're letting your people, what was the previous speaker, put up that balloon at their office that they're doing something new and different, and celebrate that with them. So, as I wrap this up, there's a couple ways I want you to think about this. First of all, from a position of violent positivity, I want you to think of yourself as a lighthouse of leadership. If you think about it, a lighthouse shines lights in all directions, and it shines lights most all the time. Okay? Lighthouses show boats where to go so that they're not going to get into wrecks. They're able to get where they need to go safely by shining that light. Never once have I seen a ship come up to a lighthouse and say, "Thank you so much for saving me." Doesn't happen. And as you as leaders, is it always going to work? They can still make choices and go the wrong way, but your job is simply to shine. Keep shining that light of leadership and a violent positivity, and you are going to make a difference in an organization. It's that simple. You bet. The next one is this. This is an F-35 fighter. This is one of the newest ones rolling off the production line. $100 million of high-tech, interesting, networking type of capability war machine that we have out there right now. Do you know what changes its flight path in flight? Itty-bitty tabs on the end of those wings and those flight control surfaces. Just little things change the direction that that airplane's going. Not huge things that make it move. Little pieces and parts, small movements, nudges in the right direction are going to change the vector of that aircraft and absolutely where it goes, what it does, and how successful it is. You're a control tab. You are a flight control surface within your organization, and small things you do can affect the organization as a whole. It's amazing the power that somebody could have by practicing violent positivity. Here's a problem. We're in a pandemic, right? Well, you know what's contagious? Positivity. Let's have a positivity pandemic, all right? Don't need a mask, all right? You can go out and you can share this stuff and you can make a difference in your organization. It's that simple. Now, like any military presentation, here are the things that I talked about right here. This is not an all-inclusive list, but here are 6 things that you can focus on to make a difference in your organization, to help people find their purpose, to help your organization meet its goals, its objectives, and its purpose for existing. It's violent positivity, folks. I'm Doug Slocum. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you today. Have a great rest of your conference so much.
Another hand for
I think that's it.
General Doug Slocum. Good job.